Hi everyone, and welcome to my updated guide for the Wind Shear Druid. I already talked about this video when I did my speed leveling run with the Druid. I went to level 100 on hardcore in less than 9 hours on this with a combination of Wind Shear and Polarize. And now I've tried to optimize the build a little bit and went for a full Wind Shear setup, which is currently one of the best Druid builds out there. There's also some new stuff emerging based around Landslide, but we'll see exactly how this will perform. For now, I can just say this is a really fun, easy to play build. I had a blast with this and it works really well. So you see here, I'm cruising for those like tier 74s right now. I've been farming 74, 75, up to 80 even, pretty comfortably on relatively bad gear on this build actually. And it just feels really cool because there are some interesting mechanics involved. For example, the God Slayer crown that pulls enemies together, which just always feels fun to use in any build, and it works really well in this one. So I want to give you the full planner and just how to play it, and hopefully you have some fun with this. I have also some other stuff coming up for Druids. I've been playing some Tornado and some Lightning Storm as well, but I definitely had the most fun and success with Wind Shear. So let's get into it. So this is the planner. If you have already seen my other video about the Wind Shear Pulverize leveling stuff, this is the same planner here. There's two different versions. So we're talking about the full Wind Shear this time. If you want to level up a new Druid, then you should check out this one here. This is where I combined Wind Shear for single target and Polarize for AoE, then together with the blood boiling aspect. It gives you those like orbs that you can collect and explode. This was a really nice leveling and also health tide farming setup. But later on, the Polarize and these blood balls don't really cut it anymore. So you go for a full Wind Shear build here. But ultimately, the main combo remains the same. So we have this Calm Breeze aspect here. This is actually a resource aspect. So we put it on a neck. And it gives Wind Shear a pretty powerful dot. And this is where all of the damage comes from in this setup. So you try to scale your Wind Shear as much as possible to boost this dot. And you can reach upwards of like 20+ million damage ticks with this Wind Shear dot once you ramp it up quite a bit. And as I mentioned in this video, for example, my gear was like almost all 0 grade affixes, masterwork to 4, so nothing crazy. And it can go way better than that. So I think even like doubling the damage or so is pretty realistic from what you saw in the video. And I see people have been pushing like over 110 in the pit already with this setup on softcore. So it's pretty good. And this is how you deal most of the damage. In order to boost the Calm Breeze aspect, we do have some powerful basic attack boosts, in especially the Moonrise aspect. You put it on a two-handed weapon here. That's a 160% damage bonus that actually works with the Calm Breeze aspect. And a bunch of attack speed and move speed is kind of nice. And the adaptability, another really powerful aspect here, is 80% damage. It is also a resource aspect, so it has to go on the ring. And then we have a few other like smaller aspects. There's Rapid for attack speed, there's Edge Masters for the extra damage. Those are not that crazy, but those two here are really big, and this one should go on the neck. And then the rest, we have the God Slayer crown that I mentioned. God Slayer crown just works really well in the setup because you just have a kind of like small AoE here. So it's only like this one little line, this projectile that pierces through everything. And if you have a bit of like tempered chance to freeze or chance to stun, for example here on the chest or on the pants, then you can trigger the God Slayer crown from range pretty easily. And this is what I use to just pull everything into one place, and then this little projectile doesn't have this downside anymore of just hitting a few targets. So you can hit the entire pull and you get this damage buff. It's actually a very powerful item for this build. So this fit in very nicely, and I like it a lot. It makes it very fun. You also have another unique here, the Wild Heart Hunger. This is more optional, I would say. You can definitely play completely without this. I see some people do Yen's Blessing, that works. So I get, for example, another debilitating raw proc here and there. You can also just go for normal boots and have maybe some mobility aspect, or you can have like a shared misery aspect or these kind of things as well, if you like that. With Wild Heart Hunger, you just have to remember you have to shift into a different form every 5 seconds. So this is something to keep an eye on here, which is somewhat hard to do on the boss, not so hard during the run, because for example you have Blood Howl that resets every time you kill enemies, but on the boss you don't reset it that often, so this buff can drop on the boss. But other than that, it's like a 30% damage buff. You get a bit of damage reduction, a bit of movement speed. I kind of like it, but it's optional, I would say. So you might do slightly less damage, but you can have other little perks from having a different pair of boots here. And well, the other aspects, we have a might aspect. So there's damage reduction, there's a hectic. This is kind of nice, gives you the cooldown reduction. Since we attack very often with our basic attack, this is pretty much all we do anyway. We can get this very, very easily to proc, and we get our debilitating roars more often. We get our trample, for example, and our blood howl. So even on the boss, you can actually just attack and reset your skills with the hectic aspect, so that works as well. The interesting part about this Calm Breeze aspect, it also functions just like any other like storm skill, it seems. It seems to work with everything that you would normally expect a storm skill to work with, which is kind of nice, and really lets us ramp up to really high numbers. So we have those aspects already, but also on the tree there are these nature skill specific aspects, or like passives like the Defiance here. We have Resonance, we have Natural Disaster. All these things actually function for Calm Breeze aspects, so this is kind of nice. Of course, the generic damage aspects or damage passives also work, like Quick Shift. So that is nice. And even on the Paragons, we have Thunderstruck. So that also boosts the damage of this dot, which is why it also does so much damage. Thunderstruck is a very powerful legendary Paragon node. So you want to stack this damage to distant enemies. And this also ramps up the dot. So overall, a lot of synergies here. The only thing that actually does not work really, that is a bit unintuitive, I'd say, is Wind Shear ranks. You only go for one rank, and that's it. And then you just scale the dot with all the other things. For the skill tree, there are some options here. So you can choose to run Bash the Rampage or Usain Strength. Usain Strength gives you 20% extra life for 3 seconds after going to Werebear, which we do with multiple abilities. So you see here Debilitating Roar, we have the Trample, and we have Pulverize as well. So I kept Pulverize. Again, this is like a one-pointer. Just for the shifting mostly, and for the defensive utility, so you can get 20% damage reduction sometimes if you like walk into a pack or something like runs up to you. You can just pulverize them, for example, they deal less damage to you. It's kind of nice. And also another easy trigger for your Wild Heart Hunger boots or for your Quick Shift. So again, with the boots you want to shift every 5 seconds. Without the boots you want to shift at least every 8 seconds for the Quick Shift. This is definitely something you want to keep up. And Pulverize helps with that as well. But otherwise, it's not really intended there for any kind of damage. It's just there to get into Werebear form whenever you want. So this is also optional. And especially if you don't really want to rely too much on the shifting, for example, Bash the Rampage, where you have to stay in Werebear form for 2 seconds, and then you have to stay in Wolf form for 2 seconds to get those buffs, you can go for Usain Strength, and you don't need to Pulverize that often. But I like it because it activates a lot of damage reduction modifiers. It's not just this 20% reduction that you apply to the enemies, it's also the heightened senses that gives you a 12% damage reduction. And also up here we have Iron Fur that gives another 9% damage reduction. So it kind of like ramps up together with like this Usain Strength buff with 20% life. You get a lot of extra survivability just from doing a Pulverize here and there. And that gives you all the shifting bonuses. So you can play the other passive here. I tried a little bit, it felt a bit clunky. It is more powerful, especially if you time this a little bit. For example, before you walk into a boss room, you can just, Blood Howl, for example, walk for a little bit, then you do a Debilitating Roar, you walk, and then you have both these active for 15 seconds. But then when the fight drags out a little bit longer, then you have to reactivate those bonuses, and I don't really like it too much. There's an alternative here, which is Tempest Roar. So you could run Tempest Roar instead of Gold Slayer, which automatically transforms you at least into a wolf form while you're doing a Wind Shear, but then you still have to stay in bear form for 2 seconds every once in a while. So overall, I just went with Usain Strength. It was an easy solution, also very hardcore friendly. So I went with that, and we have a 30% damage buff basically at all times, instead of a 50 when we stay in Werebear form, and we lose the attack speed, but we gain the health. So I like that more. We have a lot of attack speed anyway. Other than that, there are a few like tech choices here on the tree as well. So we have the Cyclone Armor. I kind of like that just for some extra damage reduction. Just makes it somewhat tanky. This is not like a Shepherd's build where you have like 0 defense. You can actually like stack up a little bit of defense here. So with the Might aspect and Cyclone Armor and so on, it does feel comfortably tanky, I would say. Even hardcore, it was totally fine. And we also have, for example, Preserving Cyclone Armor that gives you like this extra damage reduction every 10 seconds. That's pretty strong. With the Blood Howl, just some healing, some attack speed. That's kind of cool. Kills reset the cooldown, so you can use that very often. Easy for the shifting. You can use it while walking. It's very nice. Same story with Debilitating Roar. So you walk into a pack, you press the button, or you can even do it while running, so you don't lose your shifting buffs, for example. Heals you, gives you Fortify. You don't really have to play all 3 of those. You could even go with a Bulwark if you really want, just for an Unstoppable and like a CC break, but the problem is Bulwark scales very little. Like it scales off base life, so it gives you like a 3000 barrier or something. It's not really great, but it can break CCs if you have trouble with that, which is nice. Another option could also be Hurricane, so you can get some damage reduction there. You can also get some vulnerable there. but you already make stuff vulnerable with the Wind Shear. It's not that big. I've also seen, for example, I think Boiler did that in the Max Roll guide. He did Wolves as like a meat shield. That is an option as well if you want. I tried it a little bit. I didn't really like it too much, especially because as I play this build, I kind of like usually press forward throughout the pit and then shoot to enemies behind me because they kind of naturally line up as they run after me. So I like that a lot, and I didn't like the wolves kind of like running around and messing with that. But it is also an option here. And lastly, we have Trample down here. This is just another unstoppable break or like a CC break. So whenever there's, you know, some frozen or maybe a Lilith appearing at a boss fight and pulling you and these kind of things, you just have to trample there as a backup, and I like that a lot. The Paragons look like this. The cool thing about this Paragon board is if you level up a Druid with this Wind Shear pulverized build, it's actually a very similar setup here. You just kind of like change a few points from this board to that board, and we change one of the legendary nodes and a few of the glyphs or so, and that's basically it. But ultimately, if you have like a fresh Druid that you're going for, you can just level with exactly this board and then do the switch here. But to go into the Wind Shear setup, we have a few important legendary nodes. I mentioned Thunderstruck. This is the most important one here. I want to stack this up as much as possible. We have a lot of tempered distant damage on our gear, so you can put this on all of the offensive slots. The amulet, the rings, the glove, the weapon. So you get a lot of this, and this bonus is massive. Then we have Hide and Malice. Since we are poisoning stuff anyway, we just get the extra damage bonus here. That's pretty nice. And well, the rest is mostly just like going for a lot of glyphs and some res and some life. So we have that here. Earth and Sky, that gives you extra nature magic damage and lots of res there. We have Undaunted, that gives you damage reduction while fortified. We fortify very easily from shifting with some of the passives. We have the Poise Glyph. This is a pretty interesting one, but I do like it a lot. So 30% chance to gain a barrier for 15% of your life when you shift. That is actually a pretty significant amount because you shift pretty frequently. Like when I play, I usually do this like once every 3 seconds or so. So every so often I get a barrier and it kind of like absorbs a few hits or so. It's somewhat optional. You can do another glyph here, but you want to have a buff for this life node here. There's like a lot of life you can get because it buffs the rare nodes. So it's kind of nice. And I just enjoy playing with that. Here you have the Bane. This is the poison glyph. And we have Tracker, another poison glyph. And here's a human glyph. So as opposed to most other Druid builds, it's actually a human, mostly human form based build. So we stay a lot in human form and we use this glyph for the extra damage reduction and a bit of extra damage as well. For the boons, it's pretty straightforward. We take the 15% elite damage reduction, then we take the life plus attack speed, and then the last 2 rows, there's nothing really that does anything here. So it's just kind of like whatever. I took the all power and I took the spirit regain, but it doesn't really matter. So it's just those top 3 are kind of important choices. And that's already how the build works. So as I explained, you just kind of like press forward, you shoot behind you to like line up the monsters, or whenever you get a nice Gold Slayer proc, you can just stand there and shoot a few times. The boss damage is not the craziest because it has to ramp up, and well, as a Druid, you have to play somewhat defensively on the bosses, but as I mentioned, pit like 110 plus has been done with this already. And people are pushing relatively high, but it's not going to be as powerful on like the high-end push as some of the other top builds from other classes out there. But it does feel still pretty comfortable to farm this, and I had a ton of fun playing Wind Shear Druid. The good thing is that it's like a full range build, and you actually want to stay very far away for the damage to distant enemies bonuses that you have from your gear, and you can just kind of like safely dodge all of the boss mechanics. So if you have either extra evade charges or you have the attacks reduce evade cooldown on your gear, then you can like easily dodge around. You have to trample for the unstoppable, and you see here the dot is just kind of ramping up really fast and the boss is ticking down. So I hope you enjoyed this build guide here. Wish you good luck with the Druid. Stay tuned for more stuff coming soon, as I mentioned, and I'll see you guys next time.